Hi guys, I'm TheBearPanda, and today I've got a little podcast. It's basically just a 10-minute video of me talking about bears. It's going to be a weekly thing. From now on, I'm going to be putting it on YouTube, and I'm going to try and put it on iTunes and Podbay, and maybe other podcast websites. I'm not sure. I can't really. I've already recorded it. This is just a pilot episode. It's going out now. The full podcast will be longer because this pilot's just about 10 minutes long, and try and make the actual episodes about half an hour long as a minimum. So that's just it. Bye. Enjoy the podcast. Bye. Hi guys, I'm Nathan, otherwise known as TheBearPanda, and welcome to today's episode, which is the pilot episode of the Bear Podcast. I'm here to talk to you today about the greatest threat to all sentient life of all time, which is of course the often underestimated and underrated bear. The bear comes in many forms, and it has been identified on many continents across many planets. By many planets I mean this one and of course Jupiter, because the bears skipped most of the other ones due to lack of funding in their space program. They just decided to go to the nearest one they could get from the sun. I mean, furthest from the sun. I mean, why would you go to the nearest from the sun? Unless, of course, they were on one of the further away planets, like Neptune, then Jupiter would be closer to the sun for them. Which does make a bit of sense. Bears could be aliens if they could be aliens. I'm not saying they're aliens, I'm saying they could be aliens. But then evolution and that bollocks says they're actually just things from this planet, so I guess they might not be aliens. The bears, of course, are a threat to all humanity, mostly because of their killer instincts to just murder anything in their path. This just isn't just down to rural areas, it's in all kinds of areas. They are literally everywhere. They're in the countryside, they're in the cities, they're in the sea. The most common form of bear in the sea is of course the sea bear, but scientists have renamed the sea bear from its native tongue to Wales. Wales, that's why the country Wales is actually called Wales, because there are a lot of bears there and it's near the sea, so they decided to call Wales Wales after the mighty sea bears. You never get that with other animals and bears and stuff, only Wales because they're unique and inhabited by bears. Literally, the Welsh countryside is swarmed with the most feared kind of bears. Panda pedo bears. Not pedo bear pandas, they're nice creatures. The panda pedo bears, or whatever I said previously, is the most feared bear of all of Europe, with over 10,000 deaths per year to both sides in that bloody conflict. Good old war. You fight wars every day in Wales, mostly because of these goddamn bears. But not all bears are evil. I'm not trying to be racist here. There are a lot of good bears. I have many friends that are bears, many friends that are pandas. They're kind of bears. They're a bit like bears, but they sleep a lot more. Yeah, and eat a bit of bamboo every now and again. You get those nice sea bears that I was telling you about before. They're everywhere in the sea. The Japanese, of course, after the bears dropped their nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, decided that they wanted to kill all bears, and that is why the Japanese are so happy and stuff to do whaling when all other countries are against it, because no other country has suffered the tragedy of being nuked by a bear. I'm surprised the bears even managed to get the nukes. I was sure America was going to win that space race to get to the nukes and put their nukes on the moon, because that's why they needed a space in the race. Otherwise, just getting nukes, that's not part of a space race, that's just a regular race to nukes. The space race, of course, was a plan of America and Russia, both after World War II, were planning their dominance over the Earth. But they both wanted to be the true leader to destroy the bears, so they built up their massive military forces and all their nukes and stuff to kill the bears once and for all. But unfortunately, the bears managed to get their weapons to the moon first, and they were scared of nuking the bears on Earth, because then they'd get nuked from the moon. And even if they managed to take the moon, they'd get nuked from Jupiter, because that's where bears are from, apparently, maybe. Maybe they used to be. Bears can be from anywhere, really, though. I mean, there's bears in Wales, which I have mentioned many times. The Canadian grizzly bears are brutal. They're the most brutal form of bears in the entire world. It's where the High King lived. He was the first ruler of all bears, the first man slash bear to unite the entire bear kingdoms, all of them. All 11 bear kingdoms united under his rule for the first time in history. Not just human history, all of history. And this is why the bears are in their current military force now, because basically he wanted his son to be called Halakalak, like him, but they don't. And then his son became the king after him, and then he named his son Halakalak after his dad. And this cycle continued for thousands of years, until even today the High King of the Bears is called Halakalak, or whatever. And this is quite confusing, because the bears have no form of mathematics or anything like that in their civilization, so instead of calling them Halakalak the first and the second, they just call them Halakalak. And this has led to much confusion, many civil wars. It's the greatest downfall of the bears. It's the reason they're no longer able of rivaling the humans after the great bear leader in the 70s ended communism in his country. They just decided that just the bears couldn't fight anymore, and then it just turned into what modern historians call the real Cold War, which was between America and Russia, after the bears of course had left. But the bears still maintain their place on the International Security Council for the World, which annually has meetings at the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle, of course, is called the Bermuda Triangle after the three main civilizations to defend it. The first is, of course, the bears, as this podcast is named after. The second is, you'd probably guess, humans, because that's like we dominate this world. But third is the often underrated, similar to the bears, but not quite as much. Well, even more in some places, the penguins. Because despite the penguins being the only animal other than humans to lock down a continent, of course Antarctica is just dominated by penguins, as well as having colonies across the world. They have spies in every zoo across the world, well, almost every zoo, well, some zoos. Every zoo of a penguin, that's a spy. And of course they have their three meetings at the Bermuda Triangle. Each force has to send a task force of defense to the Bermuda Triangle to make sure it never gets attacked. They shoot down any planes or boats or anything that goes near it, and that's why it's the Bermuda Triangle is such a mystery. Because of course the combined forces of the bears, the humans and the penguins kills all intruders. It's not that they're evil, it's just, you know, they're being secretive about it. You don't want to have people interrupting your meetings. It's like, you know, aliens could be listening, if aliens exist, which I doubt they do for some reason. I don't know why aliens would exist, and if they would, why would they fight bears? But to be fair, the bears may have invaded Jupiter from this planet. But the bear space programs haven't been the same as what they were in the 40s. I mean, after Hitler decided he wanted to kill all bears and all Jews, the bears just like left, really. But it's not the same anymore. They've not a reason to leave, so they don't leave as much. It's not as good as it used to be, the bears. The civilization's really fallen in the last 100 years or so. It's not been great for them, really. I pity them. It's a bit sad that they've lost their ways and all their empire. It's after the breadsticks came in. People discovered that breadsticks, you know, those little breadsticks that you can get made out of like breadcrumbs or whatever, I don't really know what they're made. of, but they're actually very poisonous to bears. Because, I mean, the human digestive system can handle them because, you know, we've got like tough immune systems and stuff, even though they're not really related. So we can eat them, but if a bear eats them, the shrapnel, well, whatever you want to call it, just rips their insides out and kills them pretty much instantly. And if they eat a human, it will happen the same way. So they've evolved to not eat humans that have recently eaten breadsticks because they're scared of that happening. That's why if you want to survive a bear attack, you should always eat breadsticks. Always. Always.